a background maybe attempting to come up. We will see. I will try and Q&A this as we go, because that would be really unfortunate. Let's see. All right. Well, anyway, in the meantime, while I try and figure this out, hello, everyone. So I am Hailey Forbes. As Matt just introduced, I'm a VP of Client Management here at Jellyfish, and I have the absolute pleasure of speaking with Madhavi and Will from Whole Foods today and unpacking some of our questions around this incredibly successful and purpose-driven brand. So as we chat, you can drop your questions into the Q&A section of our toolbar, and we'll save some time at the end to answer, or we can even pop in as we're going if it's part of the flow. So we all know Whole Foods, and maybe some of us have even kicked off a kombucha addiction there. And I actually can get in and out of Whole Foods in under $100 because Jellyfish happens to be across the street, and so they have very good sushi bars there for you can get out under $20, so that's good. So Whole Foods celebrated their 40th birthday last year, and while the brand and the business have expanded and matured substantially over the last 40 years, part of that Whole Foods success is in its unwavering mission and conviction to deliver responsibly farmed, high quality organic foods. So we want to go behind the brand, obviously, and learn a little bit more about how they translate that mission to the market. So before we jump in, and while they're doing this, I'm going to try and figure out my video. Madhavi and Will, I'd love for you guys to share your background a bit and how you found yourselves at Whole Foods. Madhavi, would you like to start?
Sure, I'd love to. So I found myself at Whole Foods completely by accident, and some trick recruiting is what I like to call it. So I think probably, Hailey, we talked about this a little bit. Both Will and I have agency backgrounds. We worked at advertising agencies, I think, all of our careers before we moved to the dark side or the light side. I'll let you choose what you call it. But before we moved over sort of as clients to Whole Foods, the way it happened for me was my role at the agency was really sort of as a brand planner. That's what I did. And I primarily focused on new business. So I had sort of all the excitement, all the rage, all the close contact that you get when you're continuously pitching new business. And in the midst of one of those new business pitches, I got a cold call from a recruiter that said, hey, we're really looking for somebody that wants to think differently about brands and about strategy. And we've got a CMO that's going outside of the, traditional sort of industry to look for people that might be a good fit. Would you come in and have a lunch with us? I said no. They did not let go and called back and said, listen, Madhavi, you might be good, but there aren't that many people that would refuse a 15-minute chat with the CMO of Whole Foods. And it just so happened that the agency I worked at was across the street. So I literally crossed the street, no actual ambition to switch jobs or to talk about a different position, but one meeting with my now boss, Sonia, who's our CMO, just shook my world, and I couldn't say no. So I landed up here in 2017.
That's all it takes. Just one meeting with an inspirational person and you're there.
All it takes. Yeah.
All right, Will.
Hey, everybody. I noticed my background's, you guys are seeing my studio man cave, but I guess it's okay.
It honestly looks nice too, so we'll take it. We know where you are.
You're not seeing the mess on the ground. So yeah, like Madhavi, I spent my entire career on the agency side, up and down the West Coast, several different agencies. My last job, I was a creative director, helping oversee Southwest Airlines, Kohler, Zales, working on new business. I wasn't looking for a job either. I was really happy in my role, happy as a clam. And when this opportunity presented itself, Madhavi called me one day and said, hey, we're looking for someone to lead the creative department in Whole Foods. My first question was, Whole Foods does advertising? I didn't really know.
It's all organic.
Yeah. And so, after talking to a bunch of people, I got more and more interested. But I think what I realized was it wasn't so much about the work as much as it was about just the potential of helping to nurture our culture that got me interested. And so I've been here since 2018, and it's been a wild ride ever since.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's a theme throughout the day. I don't know if you all have been on the other sessions, but obviously we're talking to people and brands that have a lot of integrity and ambition behind them, and it's those people that are, that share those same attributes that are then working for those brands, so we know that um, our values our values drive who we choose to work for, and I think that that's very much represented here, and I'm sure we'll kind of get into that throughout our discussion. You both joined Whole Foods around the same time, 2017, 2018, so you've been there for several years. Because this wonderful pairing happened, really closely to one another. I'd love to hear from both of you, kind of at that moment in time. What did Whole Foods brand and its expression in the marketplace sort of look like, right? Like, Will, you even said they do marketing. So what did that look like when you first joined?
I'll start, and Will, you can pick up. So I think what I would say about what the brand looked like when I first joined was it was a little schizophrenic. So on the one hand, we had a brand that I think, and this is still true, was very closely kind of associated with I'll call it a hippie vibe, just sort of, as you said, like a very organic, close to
it's
nature.
all granola.
Yeah, kind of granola, very local and authentic here in Austin, because it was like Austin born and bred. You had John Mackey's kind of persona cascading down into the brand. But then on the flip side of that, you talk to customers and they talk about, the Lululemon mom, wearing all her probably $800 worth of outfits walking through the Whole Foods aisles. So you had this sort of very bipolar brand persona. And to tell you the truth, and Will, I'd love for you to talk more about this because you do it so articulately, but that was one of the things that really attracted me to Whole Foods, because usually, the job is to come in and either build a consistent persona, or to, I think some of the folks at Carter's were talking about this, or to correct a perception or a bad persona that exists. But what I found so interesting was that while we were a little bipolar, there was a little bit like a seed of truth in, but we have a foot in both those worlds. So the question for us is, do we want to walk away from one of those things? Do we not want to walk away from them? If we embrace both of them, what does that look like? And that was really sort of something that Will has helped us think through and build.
Yeah, I think with Madhavi sentiments, I felt the same way. When I started, I would describe the brand as kind of hippie, but it's pretty undisciplined. I don't think it was very strategic. Every store had its own look, which was cool and is cool. But when it comes down to marketing materials, there really wasn't any kind of vision behind it. It was kind of it's like playing darts with your drunk uncle. Just darts all over the wall except in the center.
Sounds fun, but dangerous, probably.
Yeah. Whereas I think our goal is to start from the center of the dartboard and spray out. So start with a vision of what is a updated, more modern version of this Whole Foods hippiness.
Yeah.
And balance that. Because we're always going to embrace innovation and technology. And how does that come into play with Willie Nelson, and walking barefoot and Birkenstocks, because that's important too. We should never forget that.
Yeah, well, and that's something that we've been talking about throughout the day, right? Is this idea? I mean, Whole Foods has done a wonderful job, no matter how schizophrenic it appears to us. But Whole Foods has done a wonderful job of sticking to their convictions, right, and just who they are as a brand, their core values. We know what we're getting when we look at and think of Whole Foods. And so, but one of the most substantial changes, especially over the 40 years, but really particularly over the last decade, is all of the different dimensions of your audiences that all love and are a part of that persona of Whole Foods. And Madhavi, to your point, it's well, which do we choose? Do we abandon one? Do we embrace all? What's the impact if we do either, etc.? And so I love to know a little bit about how you kind of went from that moment walking into Whole Foods, it feeling a little chaotic, a little disjointed, like you had to bring it all to center. That was sort of the first mission, and going from there. So what did that start like? And how did you guys kind of build up that plan over the last several years to where we are today, which we'll get into?
Yeah, I think like what we had, like so many of the brands that you've been talking to today, is really like there was confusion about maybe who we were from an advertising or a brand standpoint, but there was never confusion about why we're here and or, as you said, our values. So ultimately, I think we have a very beautiful purpose in that we're really all here to nourish people and the planet. And we do that in different ways. We've done it for, 40 years in different markets to different scales for different audiences. But it's also the thing that has actually like created a culture, and created a company of people that are truly committed to, even when things get hard, to truly like doing the work to push things forward. So that's where we started. We said, okay, let's forget about, how schizophrenic a brand might appear from the outside. Let's start with what we know to be true on the inside. And now both for Will and for me, we had the benefit of being on the inside. So we could really be like super honest and a little bit brutal and be like, is this something we put on a PowerPoint slide or on a website and kind of wave the flag because it feels good? And I can tell you that, I'm a Gen Xer, I'm fairly skeptical about everything. But even being like a skeptic, it is really, I've never worked at a company where purpose is so important and so core to every single behavior for us, whether that's outward or inwardly facing. And then falling out of purpose, we also have some core values that became really important to us, better understanding sort of how can we put some parameters around what we do. So we really started with those two things and then bled out to articulate, here's our positioning. Given that these things are our North Star and they will never change, how do those things manifest in today's marketplace? And to your question about audiences, I can tell you that we did have, probably when I first joined, we did have some discussion about, do we have a very specific bullseye audience? Do we want to focus on customers that we already have because we are a badge brand? We are definitely, we have premium prices. We're not a for everybody kind of brand. So do we just want to focus on a very specific market, or do we want to broaden the aperture there and include others? And we had a data point that was like really interesting that we talk about all the time, in that the minority of our customers, so 10%, about 10% of our customers are actually like core customers. They make up almost 40% of our profit. So we're always gonna, put those folks at the sort of top of our priority list. At the same time, if we really want to realize our mission, if we actually want to nourish all people and truly nourish the planet, we can't do that with a population that's this big. Even just to actualize our mission and why we're all here, we have to extend the way in which we think about our audiences. So hopefully what you experience from any marketing that we do here at the brand is that it still feels kind of true to who we are. It feels right for you if you are a Whole Foods loyalist, but it also kind of feels interesting and relevant and inviting if you're maybe not quite there yet and you're more what we call an occasional shopper.
Yeah, I think that, and Will, I'd love to hear kind of how you took that and started to express that. But I think, it sounds to me like the purpose, the job that you all had coming into the business was much different than some of the goals of the other brands. We weren't talking about a startup that was trying to, just go from 0 to 100. We aren't talking about a nostalgic brand that needed another jolt or invigoration back into the marketplace. We're almost talking about, being the guardians of this brand that has a really clear core mission. and figuring out a way to better express that in the marketplace so that it's not confusing to consumers. And so, Will, if you can take us a little through maybe the methodology that got you to today, and then we can talk about some of the specifics.
Sure. I'm an art director by trade, so I'm very visual. But at the same time, I believe like everything starts with words. And so when I first got here, looking at the overall brand aesthetic, it wasn't disciplined. And so I wanted the designers and the writers, all the creatives, to really embrace a North Star with a phrase that we could wrap our heads around and understand from a conceptual level. Here is what our brand stands for. Here's what it looks like. Here's what it sounds like. Here's how it makes you feel in your heart and what you feel in your head as a customer. And then that phrase we came up with is modern organic. And it sounds very simple, but those two words are kind of our guiding North Star in every piece of communication that we create. And it's really, in a nutshell, it's kind of a balance of like having reverence to this kind of dirt under our fingernails, hippie granola past that's always going to be part of our DNA, but at the same time doing it in a way that's simple, clean, helpful to customers, and how it feels contemporary. Because if you think about us, going back 20 years, yeah, we were like kind of that small, kind of farm standy kind of brand, but we're not really that anymore. At the same time, we're not mainstream. We're not plain. We have to thread the needle into this sweet spot that's like kind of right in the middle. At the same time, we want to be aspirational and hopefully kind of hover above, other grocers, and that we're a lifestyle brand at the end of the day. It's like Nike doesn't sell shoes, right? They sell the idea of an athlete in each one of us. And so modern organic is kind of like, that was like a way for us to kind of like crystallize everything we do, whether it's our app design, whether it's our site design, whether it's a rebrand of our 365 packaging, or even triple stack pricing on a sales line. So it had to be simple enough that could be applied to any kind of like channel deliverable, and memorable enough so that the leadership can kind of hear that phrase and go, okay, I kind of understand what you're talking about. So in a way,
it's quite the task.
Yeah, it took a lot of people to get us there.
I bet. And so I want to jump into to one of the campaigns that I know we want to talk about today, but just real quick, talking at, it's incredibly difficult to do what we're doing here and bring these things to market and do it, long term too. And so I just want to take a second and just talk about maybe some of the partners that you work with, whether internally or externally. What do you see as sort of you can't be successful without all the people surrounding you kind of helping you bring this work to life, right? And those successful partnerships are foundational, and they often are kind of treated consistently, whether it's through transparency or just having tenure as a relationship or what have you. And so I love to learn a little bit more about if you are working with partners, how are you working with them, again, whether they're internal or external, just how are you all kind of collaborating together in order to make sure that you have this really synchronous kind of campaign coming to market.
Do you want me to take it, Will?
Sure.
So I will say that in full transparency, I think our approach to partnerships has changed considerably since we met our new friends in Seattle. I think that when I joined, and certainly when Will joined as well, we worked very closely with some incredible folks, both on the sort of customer insights front, but then also on the agency front. We worked with Mullen in LA, who did sort of our first TV campaign. And the way in which we worked with them was simply to just kind of bring them into our business and say, here's our 25 things that we are trying to work on as a total business. Here's the one that we need your help with. And I think giving our partners the context for all the different things that we were trying to solve for, but also giving them some parameters around where we felt we needed their help, I think they would say that was really instrumental in helping us both feel successful and helping us both like get to a place where we thought we were adding value. Since then, you know, since we've sort of solidified our relationship with Amazon, we now have the benefit of having access to a suite of partners that Amazon works with, which I think is actually everyone in the world.
Yeah.
So on some level, so I think for us, what we are trying to be mindful of is that while there is room for incredible partners to come in and help us execute tactically, right now we are in a place of brand development where we need to be really careful that we are managing identity inside out.
Yep.
Because everything's changing, and then the pandemic happened and even more things changed. So we're sort of in this place saying, what can we do to kind of protect where we are and also be open to new possibilities, new partnerships, new ways of thinking as we go forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a tough balance to strike, right? You want to work with partners that, you know, live and breathe and understand the values of the brand and the expression of that brand, but at the same time, ultimately, you're the guardians of that, and you have to make sure that it's you know, it's in responsible hands, and that, and you know, everybody's a part and invested in the same business and the same outcomes as you. So you know, I'd love to go into one of the campaigns that we've kind of been dancing around a little bit. When I asked you all what one of your kind of proudest, what some of your proudest work has been at Whole Foods since you've joined, this one certainly came right to the top, and you know, I saw your smiles as you were talking about it immediately. So let's jump into that. So, you know, we were talking about with Whole Foods, there's like so much good things to talk about Whole Foods, right? They have this amazing mission, they're this amazing brand. They give back to communities, they're, you know, sustainable to the environment, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many dimensions that we can talk about. So how did you land on the one, Source for Good, and how did you start to, you know, reimagine what that looks like and where it is today?
Sure. Before we jump into Source for Good, I just want to mention I looked at the Q&A, and it sounds like Lisa had a question around how sustainability plays a role in our marketing strategy. And this is not directly linked, but I think our conversation around Source for Good will be sort of in that same world or in that
great
arena. So yeah, just to echo something that you were bringing up, you know, we're a purpose-driven brand. We believe in things like, you know, food access and superior quality food for everybody. But at the same time, we want to be able to make sure that we're delivering on those things in a responsible way, which means that sometimes we have to think about how we do business, but also who we do business with. So part of what's been true about how we've done business and how we found incredible products is that we have this amazing group of foragers that actually go out and find these products. They go all over the world and connect with suppliers, small suppliers, larger suppliers, and actually go sort of on a treasure hunt to find some of the world's most incredible foods. What we learned in doing that over 3 or 4 decades is oftentimes those foods, those supplements, those things are not yet in the hands of the larger producers. They're actually in the hands of some very small niche producers who are very challenged in terms of bringing their products to market in a way that is economically feasible for them. They either don't have sort of the distribution mechanism, or they may not have the capital, or they may just not know where to take it to get a little bit more visibility. So I want to tell you, probably 30 years ago, some of the folks here at Whole Foods created a committee that was designed to say, how can we partner with some of these smaller suppliers that we keep interacting with to get their goods to become more visible? How can we create sort of a win-win solution that helps us bring more innovative, interesting products into our stores, but also helps them develop their pipeline and gives them incentive to be able to do that. And a program was born. Some of you may be familiar with it, but I think many of you will not be. That was called for a long time, Whole Trade Guarantee. And it looked like a little badge that was on some of our products across the store. And it was supposed to be a shortcut for customers to tell them, here's your kind of like a good housekeeping seal of approval, but in our world, Whole Trade Guarantee, that tells you that this is an incredible product that not only gives you a delightful experience, but also supports a supplier or a grower or a producer that needs a little bit of extra help from you and from us. So obviously very hard to tell that whole story, that full story on a little banana. So we did it. The solution was to come up with a sticker. The problem was nobody knew it existed, except I think there's like one person in the chat. So thank you for remembering Whole Trade Guarantee.
Well, it's funny because you remember it, like you remember seeing the icon, but nobody
Yeah.
knew any, you just didn't know what it was. You just like, oh, there's another one.
Yeah, so exactly. And so it was like nobody understood what it meant. Nobody really, there was sort of like a vague connection with like, oh yeah, I think that has something to do with Whole Foods because it has whole in the name. And we saw this like an incredible miss really for us. The program exists. We've done this work forever. We're just not telling the story well. That's all it is. We're just literally not figuring out a way to like transmit what we do to people on the outside. So that was kind of the challenge that we all got excited about. And then Will and Will's team took it and fixed it.
With a lot of other
Hey,
people.
Will, how'd you do
A
it?
lot of other people outside of creative. So I'll share the logo with you guys, give you a little context. So I'm gonna just share screen real quick. Let's see here. Okay, is everybody seeing that logo?
Yep.
Okay, so that's the logo we created. We before we actually created the logo, we talked about how do we actually name or rename Whole Trade Guarantee into something that communicates a benefit to the customer and in a way almost kind of nods to our purpose. And so we landed on the name of Source for Good. And hopefully when people will see this with the mark, in a way it kind of communicates a product that's going to benefit the planet somehow. Now a logo can obviously only communicate so much. It needs to be supported by all the marketing and everything that exists on our site, to our paid social, the posters you see in store, articles on our site. So the logo in a way really acts as a wayfinding measure, so that as a customer, when you walk to the store, when you first walk in, when we launched the program, you'd see posters that communicated, look for this seal, right? When you buy a banana, you're not just buying a banana, but you're buying school supplies, you're buying shoes for kids in developing countries. When you shop for bell peppers with the sticker, you're not just buying, vitamin D, you're helping kids in developing countries with scholarships and giving them access to dental care. So again, like the kind of the modern organic approach to this was like, be inspiring, but be extremely clear in terms of what we're trying to communicate with this program, because that's what the problem was at the onset with Whole Trade, right? It was there, but it didn't really communicate, how a purchase of this product ultimately helps the global community. So that was kind of our task, was to be really clear, but also be inspiring and get people to buy this because they actually feel good about not just the product, but there's a strong connection to our brand and our larger purpose as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, this is just a wild logo because it is so difficult to pack all of that, right? Like the end-to-end supplier journey to the consumer buying it, and telling that whole story in a little tiny logo is remarkable. Obviously, there's a lot more collateral that goes behind that, but I think and it's such a great expression, in my own opinion, of that modern organic, right? It carries that tone very, very well. And I think, it hits like right at the jugular of your core values too. It's not even subtle. It's this is what Whole Foods does. We provide you with responsibly farmed food, right? And here's how we show that and express that to you. That's amazing.
The other thing, Ellie, sorry to interrupt you. The other thing I think it did that we often maybe need to remind ourselves of as well is like it was a really big morale booster internally. I think like for a lot of the times, the people that we tend to attract are people that are very connected to our mission, regardless of whether you work in ops, whether you're a cashier, marketer, exec, whatever it is that you do. The one thing that brings us all together is that we truly do believe that in our own way, we are contributing to, in some way making a better food world. And this little seal, whether it exists on a product, a t-shirt, a presentation, it creates a reminder for us that actually, even if it may not daily feel like it, we are actually all in it in service of this bigger thing that brought us here in the first place. So, I always say, like at a Whole Foods, like the really different thing is when we think about our target audience, it's as much our internal audience as it is, frankly, our core customers. Oftentimes, by the way, we are the best customers,
I'm sure,
of our brand. So yeah, I just think that's something like I think you would agree, it was just a real rallying cry for the whole team, and everybody got excited about working on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, having that synchronicity and having that own kind of accountability for, the brand that you are working for, and being able to be a part of something where you can see what the outcomes are for people that are not yourself, right? For something that you've been able to do for other people is it's the gem. It's what we're looking for as marketers. And we want to be able to tell more than just a good story. We want to be a part of a good company and a good brand that has amazing character and good values. And that's the dream. And luckily we've gotten to speak to a lot of people today who are living that, and you two, I think, have just shared something really special. And hopefully, as everyone goes to their Whole Foods shopping later on today or tomorrow, you'll start to take notice of that logo if you haven't already. So let's see. I wanted, we could talk forever. I do want to just drop in one more question. I don't think that we have any from the Q&A, but just one more question. So, we've kind of brought us up to current 2021. What does the brand look like? An example of this expression being sources for good. What does the future look like? How are you planning for the next 10 years? We talk about proactively getting ahead of a problem in the last session and knowing who your audience is 10 years down the line. So how are you guys kind of thinking about the next several years, decade?
Haleigh, we're just trying to figure out how to get through today.
I'm there.
No, thank you for the question. So I would say like the two kind of areas that we're very focused on. Sorry, I'll say three. One is, obviously we now have stores, both physical stores, and we have stores like on Amazon. We have Whole Foods on Amazon. So one of the areas where we're very focused, and we're still asking ourselves the question, is right now physical stores are obviously a big driver for us. How, when, where, and if we should really put as much investment, effort, and energy on the online front, knowing that our offering is actually something different from traditional groceries. So one of the things we're thinking about as we get into the future is how does our online business intersect with our physical business, and what are some places where there are synergies, but then also where are some places where we want to actually protect some of the differences. So that's a big thing that we're building for in the future. Secondly, I think equally as importantly, you've probably seen it, felt it, heard it throughout. We are like at what makes us special ultimately is our culture. It really is like we're like a weird but pretty fun bunch of people. And, you know, we're all remote. We've got a lot of new people. Our company is growing exponentially. Everything's changing around us. So a big focus for us in the next 10 years is how do we protect our culture, but also then, you know, be flexible a little bit, given that the workforce is changing and people's needs are changing and the whole world has changed. So for me, at least, I would say those are like the two kind of like strategic, external strategic and internally important things that we're thinking about.
Yeah, I think, you know, if you can, it is, first of all, the first one kind of bringing, you know, the store online and what that intersection looks like. Many people are going through that same challenge. And so you're probably in the same boat as a lot of your peers. And it'll be interesting maybe in the next several years as we come back together and we do another panel to talk about that, right? Like how have we done that successfully? You're not the only person attempting to do this and just balance sort of the, you know, real estate aspect of it with the benefit of being fully digital. So and then additionally, you know, I love that the second one was around protecting the culture, because it is something that's, first of all, it's so important at Jellyfish. It's why I've been here for 7 years, but you can't, you know, you can't run a great company and deliver a great brand without a ton of smart, hardworking people behind it that are totally aligned with you and in step with you and part of your vision. And if you're not cultivating that, then they're gone. So, so yeah, I think that those two definitely rise to the top for me and resonate. So anyway, I appreciate your all time today. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope everyone learned a little bit more about Whole Foods behind the brand.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you, Hailey, for moderating. You know, there's that famous quote about brands by, you know, from Jeff Bezos. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of him, but the quote goes, I might butcher it, but your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. I'm sure you've heard this. But what he left out that you, Madhavi, I think expanded upon is the importance of knowing who those people are, right? Which people matter. As brand marketers, staying focused on that, you know, to actualize your mission is key for resonating with your core customer. It has to feel true and right if you're a Whole Foods loyalist, but it also has to be inviting and inspiring, even if you're an occasional shopper, which probably makes your charge as stewards of the brand identity maybe easier, maybe more challenging, depending on the moment. So, and I will say this, if you're looking for incredible foods from smaller scale partners, the tomato garden in my yard is something I'm pretty proud of. Same.
Maybe you could be their next vendor.
Maybe. And you look, if not, that's fine. Maybe the panelists for our day's final session from PepsiCo can introduce me to the Tostitos salsa team and I can get in with them. Either way,